Welcome back to the Webby and O'Neill channel. I'm Kieron, and today I'm joined alongside Andy from the YouTube channel Foot It With An Edge. If you've not already watched his channel, the link is in the video description. Make sure you go and watch it after today's video because he's doing some absolutely fantastic work over on his channel. Today we will be looking at Manchester United's team and individual performances up to now from the start of the Premier League season, and Andy is going to give us a bit more data, a bit more of a breakdown, looking at the finer things of what's going on at Manchester United, where we need to improve, any weaknesses and some things that we may have missed. But first of all, Andy, absolute pleasure to welcome you onto the channel today. Can you just give the viewers and myself a little bit more about you and your channel?
Yeah, absolutely. Kieron, very happy to be here. I think you guys are doing some great work, and especially, you know, as match viewers, as someone that lives 20 kilometers away from the stadium, count me jealous. That is not everybody has the privilege of doing that, and so I'm so pleased to be here today. Yeah, Kieron, I obviously Footy with an Edge. Thank you for the intro there. I kind of got started with YouTube generally because I felt like the statistical and tactical edge was missing from a lot of the coverage that was happening on football YouTube, right? I felt like it was a lot of surface level analysis, right? Every time we won a game, it was give all the players a lifetime contract. And every time we lost a game, it's like sell every single one of them and let's get a new team, right?
Yeah.
So I just felt like, if someone says Luke Shaw had a crap game today, well, why did he have a crap game, right? What did he do that was bad? And if he had a great game today, why did he have a good game? Tell me more. And so I felt like I could provide a bit more of that context, and that's why I got started, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, I do think you actually do it fantastic, mate, doing the actual breakdowns, especially with the data side of it. I mean, I'm one of them fans that are guilty when I do actually watch the game. I'm more focusing on the Manchester United players as well, more so than the opposition as well. And you might miss that 2 or 3 passes in the build-up, to the actual goal being scored, etc. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today, and hopefully, which I actually do think, to be fair, a lot of viewers out there will actually enjoy today's video. So yeah, I'm going to get stuck straight into it. And Benjamin Sesko, he's received a lot of slander online, I've noticed, since the Nottingham Forest game. And for me personally, I do actually think he makes a lot of intelligent runs to create spaces for the number 10s like Cunha and Mbeumo to get into them scoring positions. But I just want you to break down today on what you think are his strengths and any weaknesses as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great question. Certainly, one that's top of mind for a lot of United fans. Right now, I think we are a little burned still from the Rasmus Højlund experience, right? And that is the honest truth, where we spend big money on a striker from a different league, and we feel like he's inevitably not going to work out, and he's going to be another, how do I put this nicely, a bum,
Yeah.
right? Because we're worried that we spent all this money and he's going to come in. He's not going to be physically strong enough. He's going to keep giving the ball away. We tend to forget that Rasmus Højlund actually had a decent first season because all those goals he scored in the Champions League, he was the top scorer after the group stages, I believe. And if we had Senna Lomans instead of Onana, we probably go through in the Champions League, and who knows what happens to the rest of his career. But anyways, point on Sesko is that I think we're a little burned, so we want to make our mind up even before we've seen some of the results or even before we've given him some of the time. So what I want to remind people is that 2 other big signings that came from the Bundesliga this year are Hugo Ekitike at Liverpool and Nick Voltemada at Newcastle. Both of those guys have played around the same number of minutes as Sesko has, around 600 or so minutes, and they have 1 goal contribution more than Sesko. So when you put those things into perspective, it actually doesn't seem as bad as it is, right? The problem is, I think we all got carried away with the 3 wins in a row, and we wanted that guy to get his haircut, right? And we're going into the 4th game. We see a struggling Nottingham Forest team that, by the way, should be finishing around 8th or 9th in the team. But of course, Marinakis is doing, wizardry over there with his manager. So it's proving to be a little difficult. But, drawing to them is not really a bad thing. And drawing to Tottenham, a team who we haven't beaten since 18th October 2022, by the way. So we haven't beaten them in over 1,000 days, and getting a draw against them, again, not a bad result. So I want to showcase some of the statistics of Ekitike and Voltemada to everybody on the channel here. But before that, Kieron, how do you feel about Sesko? Do you think he's actually going to come good?
I do. The reason being because of his actual runs. When you actually do focus on Sesko, I think his runs are intelligent. I thought with Rasmus Højlund in particular last season, and I know a lot of the players had a poor season, But I was seeing Rasmus Højlund just running in straight lines far, far too often, where I see Sesko, I think he actually makes runs where there's an intelligence, there's a thought process around that and trying to pull defenders out of the centre, particularly the centre halves, which then gives space to the likes of Mbeumo and Cunha to run into. For me personally, I would much rather see a player getting into them goal-scoring opportunities than him not doing so, because for me, I think that will come when it will actually click, getting into them positions where the ball will end up going into the back of the net. He just needs to get onto that run, to be honest.
Yeah, that's spot on. And the other thing I will say is that Sesko has very clean feet. If you guys notice, for someone that's 6'5", it's hard to have the right balance, right? A lot of times the ball gets caught between their feet. You know, if you look at Erling Haaland, sometimes he looks awkward on the ball, right? And that's because of, you know, the height and the way he's built. Whereas Sesko, for as tall as he is, he has very good athleticism. So he doesn't seem to like have the ball get stuck under his feet, and he feels like he can move it out of the way and do the link-up play very well, which we saw Rasmus Højlund struggle with. From a pure finishing perspective and what you would, let's say, the most important characteristic you'd be looking for from a striker, Sesko has that characteristic. We just haven't seen it yet because we're still trying to figure out how the system functions, and we're seeing the two Premier League proven players that play next to him in both Cunha and Mbeumo looking a lot better than Sesko is right now. But again, when you have Mbeumo playing 5 seasons in the Premier League already and Cunha already playing 4 seasons in the Premier League, it would be daft to expect them to not be better than Sesko, right? So that's a little bit of the problem we're having right now. And that's what Gary Neville, I feel like, fails to mention when he does his analysis. This nuance of like, yes, he doesn't look as good, but compared to other players that have come in this season, he's actually on par. So in the next 10 games or by the end of the season, we should be able to do a better analysis of how good or bad Sesko is. Whereas what Gary Neville says just kind of starts this hate campaign that we're seeing, you know, on Twitter and X.
Yeah, do you still think he's getting to grips with the actual pace, though, still, Sesko of the Premier League? You look at a couple of chances against Spurs over the weekend. You go to the Brighton game as well, late on in that first half, where it's just that extra second or that extra touch that he's taking, which he then actually gets the shot blocked.
Yeah, that's a fair criticism, right? I don't want anybody to think that Sesko is free from criticism. He's obviously making mistakes, but that's part of adapting to a new league, right? And in the Bundesliga, even that the Mickey van de Ven tackle at the end of the Spurs game, in the Bundesliga, he probably gets that extra second to take that shot. Whereas in the Premier League, you have Mickey van de Ven, who's like, I think the fastest center back in the world right now, is able to get back and put that tackle in. And if he has slightly more confidence, he probably takes that on his left foot the first time, or takes a touch onto his left foot instead of waiting for the right foot. So it's a fair criticism, and we just need to give him time. That's my point. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to miss more chances like that. But once he gets everything right, you'll also see him score chances that you're like, there's no way he should be scoring that. And that's what the XG table tells you.
Yeah, with his size as well, I would expect, you can tell me different in the stats that you're looking at the data, but with his size, I would expect more crosses going in above waist height, you know, to try and suit Benjamin Sesko, because surely heading is it one of his actual strengths as well.
Yeah, I would say that is something we need to work on, because if you look at our wingbacks right now, a particular weakness in both wingbacks is crossing, because Ahmad is left-footed on the right side. So for him to cross, he prefers to cut inside and then cross. I think even Mbeumo on that side prefers to cut inside and then cross. We're not really in positions on the right-hand side to put in the early cross that would benefit someone like Sesko, because he also has the pace to beat the defender once the cross is put in, right? And on the left-hand side, we have Dalot, again, who has to cut inside, and even when he does, you know, 9 times out of 10, his crosses isn't very good. And Dorgu is the most promising one for me, because he is left-footed on the left-hand side, and he has put in some good crosses, but his decision-making is a little bit suspect. So I suspect over time we will get a lot better at putting in crosses for Sesko as well.
Yeah, as you know, the last 5 games we are actually unbeaten. And what do you actually put that down to? Is it just improved individual player performance, or is this team actually starting to click now with an understanding of what Rúben Amorim wants from him?
Yeah, I think that's the million-dollar question, right? Everybody's trying to figure out why, I guess, most of the fan base wanted him sacked after the Brentford game, and why we're sitting here after 11 games, you know, more upset that the guy hasn't been able to cut his hair yet. right? And more upset that we drew 2 difficult away games. I think it's mostly down to the players executing the system very well. If you look at Rúben Amorim's system, it is built on vertical passing. So he wants to get the ball as quickly as possible from the goalkeeper in the build-up to his forward players, so that there's less chance or less time for the opposition defense to settle. And it also depends a lot on positional versatility. Like, he wants Mbeumo to be as good going back as he is going forward. He wants Cunha to do the same thing. He wants Luke Shaw sometimes to go from left center back all the way to the left 10 spot, right? If he's pressing somebody and he gets into that spot. So every single one of these players needs to be comfortable playing multiple positions. I think the most, let's say, fixed ones are probably Sesko and the central center back in De Ligt or Maguire. So if you ask me why we've gone last 5 unbeaten and why we weren't able to do it before, I think it's purely down to player execution of the Amorim system. And I feel like that also comes down to the finishing aspect. Because after the first 6 games, there were so many chances that we created. We put on a plate. Who remembers that Ahmad chance against Burnley where Mbeumo cut it back for him and he skied it? That was a 0.5 XG chance, which means, he should have put that in the back of the net, but he didn't. And then we also had 2 penalties missed that cost us 2 games against Fulham and Brentford. And that guy should have been sent off as well. But we're not going to talk about refereeing decisions today, but that's kind of the long and the short of it. But Kieron, what are you seeing? I have some stats to share with the viewers here in a second, but what is it that you're feeling like around Old Trafford, going to the games and speaking to people outside the games as well? What's the feeling around the fan base before and after?
Well, there's definitely an improvement. I think you see more often than not over the last 5 games, smiles on the fans' faces when matches are actually finished. And most important, seeing a smile on Rúben Amorim and the players' faces. If you want to, I know we were leading against Nottingham Forest and leading against Spurs, but the way they went down to 2-1 in both of them games and still managed to come back with some late goals there, to me it shows a fighting spirit and a real bond now amongst this Manchester United squad. And I think that's the bare minimum what we've been demanding here as Manchester United fans, because we haven't been getting it. And especially last season, we've seen a lot of players, I think, in my eyes, give up last season, not willing to make that extra 2 or 3 yards on a run to help out the teammates, where it was too much of a individual mindset, I thought, last season. So to me, this season, it's definitely looking like more of a team and a strong bond there. And I think that will help us get a few points this season.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, right? Because it's always helpful to analyze any team with a combination of like stats and tactics and what the eye test tells you. Because at the end of the day, the end product is the eye test.
I go back to the Brighton game, which we won here at Old Trafford only a few weeks ago, and I thought the back three in that game, I thought they were great in the way they stepped up into midfield to create that extra body in there. And for me, just with the eye test, your stats and data might tell me different. I think that allows them Bruno Fernandes to push forward, then to connect with the 10s and the centre forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think perhaps what you're mentioning is specifically Luke Shaw jumping into midfield a lot to mark Jorginho Ruder, who was playing as the starting number 10 for Brighton. And what you'll notice is actually Amorim assigns the left center back and the right center back to mark a specific player against specific systems. So if we're playing against a 4-2-3-1 that has a number 10 in it, what will most likely happen is one of those 2 center backs, so the outside center backs, will be assigned that job to mark that person, so that we're not getting pulled out of position every time that guy moves from left to right. And that same thing happened in the Tottenham game as well. You'll notice Luke Shaw was marking Xavi Simons the whole time, right? So he was dropping deep. There was a point where Luke Shaw went all the way forward into the left 10 spot, and Mbeumo went all the way back to the left center back spot, just because Xavi Simons had dropped deep for build up and Luke Shaw followed him the whole way. So that's definitely something that's happening more of. And I think that's, again, the players understanding the system, because if you remember after the City game, I didn't like the fact that Bruno did this, but he came out in the press conference and he said Euro made the mistake of not jumping into midfield. And so I think the players are just understanding this a lot better, and you're spot on. That allows Bruno more room to go up further up the pitch.
Does Amorim want that from his centre-backs in every game, or is the actual tactical shifts depending on the opponent and how they set up?
So in specific games, it will be more of a man-marking job. And in other games, it will be a shared responsibility, if that makes sense. So in every single game, he wants the center backs to jump up. But in specific games, it's more of a man marking job. So you'll see Luke Shaw trying to follow that guy around everywhere, and the other two center backs switching to stay as the two and marking the striker. Because the problem you have against a 4-2-3-1 is that, let's say Kolo Muani, you can't have three of our center backs marking Kolo Muani because that's just one player. And then you also have the wingers on two sides, right? So instead of having a situation where three of them are marking Kolo Muani and Xavi Simons makes a run on the left side once and on the right side once, and the center back's not knowing who's supposed to go with him, you have a situation where Kolo Muani sits with De Ligt and Euro, and then you have, or De Ligt and Maguire, sorry, and then you have Luke Shaw as the dedicated person following Xavi Simons around. So that helps all three of them know exactly what they're supposed to do. This is a website called Understat. It tracks the XG and expected goals against and expected points. And essentially, this is a good measure of, under the surface, how good is the team actually playing. And so after the first 6 games, which is before the unbeaten run, and this is right after the Brentford game, United were sitting in 14th with 7 points from 6 games. And according to expected points, we were actually supposed to be in 5th, right? So the underlying metrics based on how many chances we were creating and how many chances we should have scored, we should have been 5th. But because of the poor finishing that we've already talked about, Kieron, we were actually in 14th. Now, if we skip forward to the next 5 games, so if we look at the unbeaten run that we've just had, this is what the table looks like, right? In 5 games, we have 3 wins and 2 draws. And based on the league form, we should be 5th. And if we look at expected points, we should be about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th, right? So we should be 9th, but we are actually 5th. And so that's essentially a body of work that when you put together leaves us in 7th on the table, right? So what that means is in the first 6 games, we were playing better than we were performing. And now we are performing better than we are necessarily playing under the surface. So it's kind of a reversion to the mean in that sense, where we weren't getting what we should have been getting, but now we are getting slightly more than we should be getting.
And we had a discussion, myself and my dad, after the Tottenham game, and he made a massive statement. I thought he actually said that Bryan Mbeumo is the best signing here at Manchester United since Bruno Fernandes. And I'd just like you to give a bit more of a detailed look at Bryan Mbeumo and what he actually offers other than just goals in this team, not just in attack as well, but defensively, and how that side of the pitch has changed.
I don't think that's a hot take from your dad either. I would absolutely agree with that. In fact, I'll go as far as to say I think Bryan Mbeumo is now the best player in our team. Even though as good as Bruno Fernandes has been, I think Bryan Mbeumo is firmly the best player in our team. And I also think whenever I looked at Bruno over the last 4 or 5 years, I felt like we could never be a title challenging type of team that we want to be if Bruno was our best player, right? Because if Bruno is your 3rd or 4th best player and he's providing and creating chances for those, 2 or 3 Mavericks in front of him, that's getting the best out of Bruno as well. And now I feel like we're kind of building a team, but unfortunately, Bruno's towards the tail end of his career, not in his prime anymore. But Mbeumo, for sure, the thing that I like about Mbeumo the most is he has no ego, right? He seems to be a player that can take on tactical instructions and he just follows it. And what I was surprised by is also Matheus Cunha, also being a flair Brazilian player, but also being humble enough to follow the tactical instructions. And I liked what Jason Wilcox said in the recent interview they did Inside Carrington, the podcast that they did, where they talked about the off the pitch stuff being as important as the on the pitch stuff, right? He said clean living professionals. And Mbeumo strikes me very much as a clean living professional that just wants to come and play football, that wants to make his money, that wants to earn the bonus because he scored a goal and not because, he's doing some off the pitch stuff that we don't want to be associated with. And so the comparison that I've heard a lot of is with a certain Mo Salah, right? People have talked about Mbeumo being our version of Mo Salah, right? In the way he plays and sort of, also being an African international, obviously. And these are his stats this season, right? He, for attacking midfielders and wingers, he is the highest in terms of non-penalty goals this season, right? No other winger has more goals than Mbeumo in the league, basically. And if you look at his XG as well, it's pretty good. He's overperforming his XG, which again signals to him being a good finisher. And you can see he's taking a decent number of shots. He has a decent number of let's say non-penalty XG and expected assisted goals. And then he's also strong in terms of touches in the attacking penalty box and receiving progressive passes. What that essentially means is he's on the end of attacks more than he is necessarily in the build-up for attacks. Now, if we compare this to, this is Mo Salah's current season, right? And obviously he's not having a great season, but in terms of profile, it's kind of looking a little similar to Mbeumo. But if we take it a step further and we look at Mo Salah's previous season, where he got 29 goals and 18 assists in the league, which is, by the way, one of the best Premier League seasons by any forward. He very much carried them to the Premier League title last season, and not a lot of credit goes to him, whereas most of the credit goes to Arne Slot. But we won't talk about Liverpool here. And essentially, it's a very similar profile to Bryan Mbeumo, because you're looking at very high non-penalty goals, very high non-penalty XG, shot creating actions, and the expected assisted goals is also high, and then touches in the attacking penalty area and the progressive passes received are also very high. So in the way that they both play, even if you're not, using your eye test, the stats are also telling you that Mbeumo is very much a Mo Salah in the making. And for those of you guys that can remember, Salah came into the Liverpool team when he was around 25, 26, and he had already had, stints with Chelsea, with Roma, with Fiorentina in the Serie A. And he was a player that was coming into his prime, but nobody really saw it coming. And I feel like with Mbeumo, even though as good as he's been with Brentford, I think there's a step up that he can go. And I think he has the potential, the ceiling, to be a top 3 player in the Premier League, like competing with the likes of Haaland.
Yeah, I think last season, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he scored around about 20 Premier League goals for Brentford. And, he started life off at Manchester United, a fantastic in terms of his work rate and putting that ball in the back of the net. So would you say it's actually not a fluke that them 20 goals he scored for Brentford, that he can actually replicate that here at Manchester United at some point?
Absolutely. I think he can do more when this team is fully functioning to the way that we think it can function. I think Mbeumo could have more goal contributions this season than he even had last season. And that's a tall order, because he had 20 goals and 9 assists. And he's also one of those players that overachieved his expected goals, just like Cunha did, just like Sesko did in the Bundesliga. So I see it happening where we could be looking at him having another 30-goal season in the Premier League, and very much, like I said, being one of the top 3 players in the Premier League, not just in the United team, but the whole Premier League.
Oh, he just seems like a top professional and a character and attitude that we needed bringing into this football club, just with the likes of Cunha, Le Mans and Sesko. And I think a lot of Manchester United fans are happy with the summer signings up to now. But just going on to something we touched on earlier on in the video, and that was about crosses in particular for Sesko. And it's the wing-backs. A lot's been mentioned on our channel over the recent weeks about the wing-backs with the likes of Dorgu, Dalot, Mazraoui and Ahmad. What's your take on it? What does the data say in how they're actually performing in this team?
Yeah, I think that's, again, I would say one of the other $1 million questions, right? Because we all get a little frustrated when Dorgu gets into the position to cross and he doesn't put in a good cross, or Dalot takes a poor touch and kills the attack, right? I would definitely say wing backs alongside the midfield are 2 positions we need to address in the transfer window, as sooner rather than later. Yeah, so if we look at his sort of best 11 here, and I know that's something you also wanted to discuss, Kieron. Ahmad is his preferred right wing back, and on any given day, if you had to ask him for any game, he would say Dalot is his preferred left wing back right now. Because with Dorgu, he's not really seeing, he's still very young, right? So I think in terms of taking on the tactics, especially in a system as complex as Rúben Amorim's system, Dorgu a little bit struggles to take on the tactical instructions. So I think Dalot is the starting left wing back. Now, primarily what Amorim wants from his wing backs is for them to be wingers. In any game state that you're looking at, like imagine a screenshot of the game that you're taking in your head, what you will most likely see is Dalot being very high and wide on the left-hand side and Ahmad being very high and wide on the right-hand side. And the 2 10s will actually drop deep to pick up the ball and progress the ball forward. So you'll see this kind of U shape within the midfield and the attack. And sometimes, actually, in the last 5 games, if you look at the average positions of these players, you'll actually see Bruno is higher than Cunha on the pitch, because Cunha's goal is to drop deep and pull the opposition midfielders or the opposition defenders out of position. And Mbeumo does the same thing on the right-hand side. So this is the kind of vision that Amorim has in his head. And where we're struggling is that the left wing back particularly can't really do the positional interchanges as well as Ahmad can with Mbeumo. And that's why most of our attacks are coming down the right-hand side. What Amorim wants, like we discussed before, is moving the ball vertically as soon as possible, right? So from goalkeeper into the forwards, if it can happen within a few passes, he said it in a press conference recently as well, he will do it. And the problem is that sometimes the wingbacks actually need to be fullbacks and the 10s actually need to be 10s. Or sometimes the wingbacks need to come on the inside and play in this space. And Dalot isn't really good at doing those things as much as Ahmad is. And so that's where the big issue that I'm seeing coming up.
From what I see with the eye test with Dalot when he's on that left wing back spot, he has a tendency really to maybe cut more inside because he is naturally right-footed. But with Dorgu, he does seem to hold that width on the left-hand side. But it's just his final ball, his delivery for me, that surely in training he will be able to improve on, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you asked me which wingback fits the Amorim mold better than any other wingback, I would put Dorgu right at the top, even above Ahmad. Because if you look at his physical attributes, right, he's strong, he has great stamina. When he puts in the cross, it actually looks like a better cross than any of the other wingbacks that we have as well. And he's, good to go up and down all game. The problem is the decision making. And that's where Ahmad is infinitely better than Dorgu already. But let's not forget, Ahmad's also 3 years older than Dorgu is. So he will get there. The question is, how long will it take? And do we have the patience to wait till he gets there?
Do you think if things don't improve, shall we say, in that area of the pitch at left wing back, with Dorgu and Dalot with their actual output towards the top end of the field, do you think when Martinez comes back into that back three, do you think it's possible that Luke Shaw could go into that left wing back spot?
Absolutely. I think the whole team would be better off for that move. Sorry, it's snowing pretty heavily here. So I think Luke Shaw as the left wing back really helps us because he also has a tendency to switch off defensively. Let's not forget when we purchased Luke Shaw, and you'll remember this, Kieron, he was one of the best attacking wingbacks or fullbacks in the Premier League when we bought him from Southampton. So defending isn't something that comes naturally to him. It is something that he's learned over time, and he's been good at it. But he does have the tendency to occasionally switch off defensively, like we saw against Forest, actually, when the right back Savona got past both Dalot and Shaw on the left-hand side, and then De Ligt had to come across to cut him off from his shot. So I think that will be a great switch once Martinez is back in the team.
Yeah, before I get on to the final question of what do you think Amorim's strongest starting 11 is, Casemiro and Bruno, what do you think about their partnership and any weaknesses or improvements that may have gone under the radar amongst fans in what they're actually doing in the 90 minutes?
We probably need another 30 minutes to talk about this, Kieron, but I'll say this. I think I have been very impressed with both Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro this season. I think you can see some of that with the eye test as well, right? Because as soon as Casemiro goes off the pitch, we're in shambles, right? Because Ugarte comes on and he kind of wants to play hot potato with the ball and he doesn't want to keep it to his feet and he doesn't have the patience to kind of just sit with the ball sometimes. He just wants to pass it quickly and try to get the ball away from himself. So Casemiro, both with his fitness and with his match experience, right, in terms of when he needs to just hold on to the ball and not do anything with it. I've been very impressed with that. And Bruno, in my opinion, is right up there in the top 5 most improved players in the Premier League this season because people don't seem to realize that this man in his 14th season as a professional footballer has learned an entirely new position that he's never played before, right? And if you see, he's not doing those Hollywood passes anymore. The Hollywood passes that we used to, criticize him for because he used to keep giving the ball away. He doesn't do that anymore. He keeps patience on the ball. And we used to look at someone like Martin Odegaard or Kevin De Bruyne at our rivals and say, oh, look at them, how well they can keep the ball and how much more effective they are. But what we didn't realize is that Bruno was playing those Hollywood passes because he was being asked to. Because someone like Marcus Rashford, Mason Greenwood when he was still here, Anthony Martial, These are players that play well on the counterattack, so Bruno had to do those things. Whereas now, he's being asked to play safe and do a lot more defensive work, and he is actually doing that. If you look at the underlying stats, he's actually just as good, if not better, than Declan Rice, Enzo Fernandez, and Bruno Guimaraes at Newcastle, right? These are all players that we look at and say, oh, they're better than Bruno at central midfield. But the stats are actually saying Bruno's doing just as good a job.
I'm sure a lot of viewers out there will have something to say on them comments and them stats on Bruno Fernandes. So make sure you do get involved in that comment section. But yeah, just to wrap it up then, Andy, what would you say is Amorim's strongest starting 11 right now?
Are we talking without Martinez or with Martinez?
Let's put Martinez in.
So if Martinez is fit, I think we're looking at Dalot dropping out of the team, and we're looking at Shaw going into left wing back and Martinez playing that left center back role. And I think people will be surprised how much of an improvement just that one change makes. And you'll notice I haven't put Maguire in here. You'll notice I haven't put Mainu in here. You'll notice, there's no Ugarte either, because I think a lot of people in preseason wanted to see the Ugarte-Mainu midfield playing a lot more as well. I think there's a longer discussion to be had about Kobbie Mainoo, and I think there's an interesting conversation to be had there. But frankly, right now, he's not doing more than Bruno Fernandes to get into this team. He's not doing more than Casemiro to get into this team. And I think he has a lot of improvement left to do to play in a system like this. So in terms of long term, I don't know what he's doing in training, obviously. I wish I had eyes and ears in training as well to tell you that, 3 games from now, he's going to be straight into this team. But he has big competition, and I don't mind that as somebody that wants to see young players improve. I think Amorim is the right type of coach to make sure Kobbie Mainoo stays grounded. What are your thoughts on this starting 11? Do you agree with this?
To be honest with you, I would actually, I'm looking at the individual players. The one thing that I have been impressed with this season, and I think it's our best attacking partnership, it's Mbeumo and Ahmad for me. And I think that is probably our strongest starting 11. I think on the left-hand side, the left wing-back spot, I did bring it up a couple of weeks ago about the possibility of Luke Shaw going into that position. It's just a case of, can his body handle at least 70, 80, 90 minutes of a Premier League match? I'm not too sure on that. Only Rúben Amorim and the staff will know, but I would definitely try Luke Shaw at left wing back just because of his crossing ability as well. I would say he's one of our best crossers from them positions at the actual football club, to be honest. So for me, it is something I would try if it was the manager when Martinez goes back.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. It's when we spoke about Sesko and the lack of crosses earlier, that was one thing I meant to bring up, which is Luke Shaw is easily one of our best crossers, specifically putting in that early cross from somewhere around this area, actually, when you're just entering the final third, he puts in that early cross, and Sesko could really benefit from that. So that's a great observation, Kieron.
Yeah, in the centre of midfield, I really expected Ugarte to kick on this season. I thought in some games last season he was unfairly criticised for some of his performances, but I think it was the Manchester United-Everton game in pre-season. The start to that second half, there was 2 or 3 opportunities that he had with the ball at his feet, and he ended up getting dispossessed with it. And he's a player to me that doesn't seem like he's progressed with the ball at his feet, and he's still looking very limited in the way he actually receives the ball off his back three or players around him on the pitch.
Yeah, and I think Rúben Amorim is the most disappointed person in the world with that, because let's not forget, Ugarte played for Amorim at Sporting Lisbon, and he doesn't seem to be the same player he even was then. Forget about progressing, right? Because he gets very flustered on the ball. He looks like somebody that doesn't want to have the ball. He would prefer just putting in the tackles and giving it off to somebody else. And listen, when you're someone like N'Golo Kanté, who is really good at winning the ball back, people tend to forget that Kanté was actually also a very good dribbler. And when he needed to, he could keep the ball or he could move forward with the ball. And I feel like Ugarte has lost his confidence. Confidence is a big problem for him. You could argue that maybe he doesn't have the confidence because Amorim doesn't pick him in games, but I could also argue that he hasn't shown enough to validate him being picked consistently. And we saw that in the City game as well. He started, he put in a lot of good tackles, but he also made defensive mistakes that led to the third goal.
Yeah, you mentioned Kobbie Mainoo there, and I was just wondering, maybe after the international break, if we could do another chat on the channel going into a bit more detail on Kobbie Mainoo.
Absolutely. I think that it's a very interesting conversation. Feel like Kobbie has done it to himself in a way, because if you remember in the Grimsby game, he played 90 minutes and we lost that game. And if we had more time in the League Cup, I think we could have seen more minutes from him. But unfortunately, the cards have fell the way they have, and he has to wait.
Still a lot of minutes and there's still a lot of games all to be played for the rest of the Premier League season. So who knows who will get that opportunity, and let's hope they grab it with both hands, if it's Mainoo, Agate, or any of the others. But I'd just like to wrap it up there with you, Andy. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to your thoughts, the breakdowns, the data of it. And I said to all the viewers out there at the start of the video, please go and check out his YouTube channel, Footy with an Edge. The link is in the video description. There's great work going on over there by Andy and his brother, so please go and check that out. I'd just like to thank you all for joining us today. If you have enjoyed this video, let us know in the comments section what your thoughts were on the actual chat today. Smash that like button as well to help support the channel, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you, everyone.